After working in a card shop in their teens, they opened a shop in the mid 2000s, a shop of their own. And after shutting it down during the 2008 economic downturn, they began focusing on content creation and started the Sports Card Radio website and podcast. They're some of the longest running podcasters in the hobby, and at the same time are some of the most loved and most hated characters creating content today. Colin and Ryan, welcome to the show.
What's up, Mike? How's it going, Mike?
I am doing well. I'm excited to have this conversation today, kicking off a Thanksgiving weekend. Should be a lot of fun. Many of the folks who have only recently discovered your YouTube channel aren't really aware of your multi-decade background in the hobby. Let's talk about those early days. What was it that inspired you guys to open your original card shop?
Well, I mean, we first started, it was maybe 20 years ago or so, right around 2001 or so. We got a wholesale license or a resale license. And so we started online, started selling boxes on eBay primarily, and, buying boxes wholesale, and then reselling them, reselling cards and things like that. We did that for, I would say, 5 or 6 years. The goal wasn't always to open a shop, but we kind of just moved into that direction. That was right around 2006. And so the shop was a mix. It was probably like 70 or 80% like apparel, like sports, like the stuff that you find on Fanatics these days, like t-shirts and jerseys and hats. And it was probably 20 to 30% cards. And, we had an eBay store, and, in 2006, the economy was pretty good and it made a little bit of sense. I think our first year we did okay. And by 2007, things started getting rough where we were, I mean, really across the country, but, we certainly could have done things differently. But yeah, I mean, we've been buying and selling cards for over 20 years now, primarily. And, it really just started out as just, we started out as collectors, and then we kind of transitioned into kind of the more business side of it. And I think that's where a lot of our content comes from today. We're more interested kind of in the business side, the buying and selling of cards, rather than the actual accumulation or collecting of them. But yeah, we really just started 20 years ago or so, and just kind of, evolved over the years, really.
Were you entrepreneurial as kids? I know you worked in a card shop, but did you kind of have that money-making entrepreneurial type spirit as kids?
Probably so, probably more so than other people. We always kind of had, at least not maybe centered around cards, but always the idea that we wanted to own our own business, interested in stocks from an early age. And I don't know really where that comes from. Both of our parents, work full-time jobs and were teachers and stuff. So it was just a bug that kind of hit us. We did start very early on working behind the counter in a card shop. I mean, I think this was like in 7th or 8th grade. Both of us were working behind the counter, sorting cards, sorting through sets, picking out singles, doing little things for kind of a card shop where we grew up. So we probably saw the business side of cards kind of early on, and maybe sooner than a lot of people do. I mean, we were in 7th and 8th grade kind of working in the back and understanding kind of the finances and the economics of a card shop back. This would have been in the kind of mid to late 1990s. So we always kind of had that in the back of our head. The card shop that we started up, like wasn't a lifelong dream. In hindsight, it was certainly a bad idea. We were younger at the time. Neither of us probably very good operators of kind of a retail store, a retail business like that. So good experience in hindsight, but neither one of us, and I could certainly speak for, myself, I was not set up for that type of job. When you open a store, it becomes a full-time job. And in that time, the internet wasn't what it was. There certainly was eBay. But I think nowadays, if you own a shop, it's much easier to reach a bigger audience, sell things, and you could kind of hustle more than back in those days when cards certainly didn't have the popularity that they did now. People looked at baseball cards and said, what? And so, we didn't do a very good job, but we learned a lot, and we kind of parlayed that into kind of our next step in the card world with the website and the content creation and so on and so forth. So it was a good learning experience. And even to this day, I mean, I bought $500 worth of cards, the other day. So I'm still kind of buying and selling cards, but in a much different way. Kind of similar to how you do, Mike, with using ComC and buying really kind of cheaper cards. So still involved with buying and selling cards, but it's not the kind of main focus. I do it more for fun and just to see kind of how big I can build a ComC portfolio. And it's fun to just flip cards and stuff.
Well, after the shop went down, it didn't work out quite the way that you thought, and you adapted. And like you just mentioned, you started creating the website, you started creating content. Where did that idea come from?
I would say I was working. So towards the end of the shop, it was struggling. I start working for an insurance agent, and he has a podcast, and I start realizing that there was an opportunity there. I remember also when we're running our shop, there were times where there wasn't a lot of people there. So I was working on our website, and I was realizing that you could make money on eBay affiliate network. You could make money with Google AdSense and things like that. And so it was always something that I had at the back of my mind that, hey, that's something we could kind of transition into. It started out as just the podcast. I think I started in July of 2008, somewhere right in there. It was actually right before we closed the shop. And as the months went on, we closed. And then I remember just saying, hey, we could maybe build this, because I was already getting traction, people emailing me and stuff like that. And so I was like, we could probably build this out into a website. And I think Sports Card Radio was actually started in January of 2009. So it was several months later. And that's really how it started, was just, I wanted to maintain a connection with the community. We had spent all this time. We'd spent at that point over 10 years of our life kind of buying and selling cards. I wanted to just continue to move it forward. And I just knew affiliate marketing was just kind of getting up. Online advertising was just kind of becoming a growing business. And I thought it was a cool way to make money, where you could just kind of his line was, I just want to sit around and make money. And I was like, well, I think we could sit around, work on these websites, and then make money on it. And less people were doing it back in 2008, 2009 than certainly they are today. But I certainly saw that there was some opportunities there. And we had a little bit of knowledge on trading cards. And so we just kind of ran with it from there.
Where did you learn about website creation and affiliate marketing? I know you just said you kind of were dabbling with it, as you were doing the website for the shop, but did you do anything in particular or specific to learn about building a website and building an audience and building that kind of affiliate revenue?
It was really really just trial and error. It was a lot working with there was like pro stores. eBay owned pro stores, I think, back then, where it was almost like Shopify for your eBay store. So I started there. And then when I got the job with the insurance agent, I basically kind of faked it that, hey, I know how to do websites. And he was like, okay. And then he gave me this whole website to build out. So I basically taught myself how to build out websites. And it's not complicated to build a website. It's really, the front end is pretty easy. What you see, it was like learning the back end that took some time. And it was really just faking it with this insurance guy, and then him giving me a bunch of tasks, having to figure all that out, and then seeing, oh, he's getting traffic, he's doing marketing this way, and then kind of translating that over into trading cards is really, it was all self-taught, obviously watching at that time, maybe a little bit of YouTube videos, but it was a lot of like reading forums and reading Q&A, reading different types of things, and just kind of self-teaching yourself along the way. And none of the websites that we have are at all complicated at all, but you can teach yourself these things, and it's obviously a lot easier today than it was 10, 12, 14 years ago or so.
Between the both of you, you've dabbled in a variety of content areas. You've hit on Beanie Babies, tickets, stock analysis, Amazon selling and reselling. And some of those you've continued, and some of those that, you've eventually stopped. What process do you guys go through when you're kind of thinking through and determining if there's an opportunity to go deeper with one of these different websites or shows, and when it's time to just kind of shut it down and back off?
For me, it's changed a lot. For me now, I only do what I really want to enjoy. It used to be driven more financially, and I got into scalping football tickets. I mean, the most money I've ever really made is scalping football tickets for about 4 or 5 different years. That's a completely separate thing than building a website. It's similar to flipping cards, but just imagine if you bought, like, say, $10,000 worth of cards, and then at 1 p.m., all your cards are worth zero. So it's just super high pressure, very lucrative if you know what you're doing. And certainly I learned a lot of the basics of scalping football tickets from buying and selling cards. It's very similar, but it's high pressure. Certainly when COVID came around, it was a free year off for me. So now, kind of after COVID, I reevaluated, and I was like, I only want to do things that I really enjoy. So it doesn't matter how lucrative something is. If I have to get up at 3 a.m. to flip a Miami, Florida versus Kentucky football game, it's like, that's not, even if it's lucrative, it's just something I don't want to do. So actually sitting around and creating the sports card content, it is a lot of fun. It's probably one of the most fun things that we can do, especially, if it's me and him on a live stream and we're just yucking it up, talking about God knows what, and just making fun of people. I mean, that's kind of what we've been doing for many years. And now we've certainly got a lot of eyeballs on it. So for me personally, I don't have any kids. I don't have a family. So I can kind of pick and choose. Hey, I only want to do these certain type of things. I don't want to have a whole lot of stress in my life. So I've chosen to just focus on a few very narrow things. And that's for me. He has some kids, so he might have to kind of do some more things out of financial judgment, but for me, it's more out of
I would just say, hey, it's all about don't be scared to fail. Like, like the shop that could be looked as a failure, but without that process of going through that, having to show up at whatever time we opened, having to be there all these hours, it kind of led us into, like, we don't want to do that. We don't want to sit around and have to be somewhere 8 to 5 every single day. So without that experience, it wouldn't have pivoted us into, like, the content. And with the content, don't be scared to fail. Because you always learn something. Every website, everything that we've done, we've always learned from it. And you always get a little bit, maybe better appreciation for what does work and what you really do enjoy. But oftentimes you learn a small piece that then you can kind of translate over into another piece of content or another business or something like that. So my thing has always been, don't be scared to failure. In fact, when you fail, that probably is a sign that you are on the right track. You're very close to success when you have a lot of failures, especially if you're learning from them and kind of building on them. So for me, it's always about just trying something new. I personally appreciate kind of building something up when something's kind of reached, like, where it's made money and reached its peak. I lose a little bit of interest in that. And so I'm always kind of looking for that new thing, new excitement to kind of start something up and see if you can't build it up.
I think you hit on something that's important, right? That willingness to take a chance on something and not get hung up on if it's a immediate success or a failure. Where did you develop that comfort and that realization that adapting is crucial and that it's okay to try all of these different things?
I would say just a lot of business people that, especially later after college, admiring a lot of business people. That was the advice I constantly got. Growing up playing golf, you're constantly failing, constantly having to try new things, constantly having to adapt your game, having to, feel like one day you're on the midst of being a pro, and then the next day you feel like you can't even hit the ball. And so it was probably just a mix of growing up, and then growing up in Stockton, you're just constantly presented with challenges and temptations and things like that, where you constantly have to, readjust your focus. But for me, it was a mix of, it was probably playing golf and learning the discipline of that. But then also after that, getting into business, studying all the great business leaders, where almost some of the first things they talk about are their failures. And in fact, they're more open and excited about their failures than they are their successes. And so for me, that always got me in the right mindset that, hey, if you're failing, like, if you try to do exceptional things, you're going to fail quite a bit. And so if you're not failing a lot, chances are you're not pushing yourself hard enough. And so it was always just that mindset of push yourself to failure, because that means you're pushing yourself to the edge, and often to the edge of success. And so that's just where I've got it. And it's just kind of come naturally, I think, a little bit, but also kind of learned it through business school, through business leaders, things like that.
So you guys have been working for yourselves for the last, 15, 20 years now. Could you even go back to working for somebody else at this point?
No way.
Yeah.
No way. 100% no way. I've been offered things that there is with children. Now, if I was a single guy and I wanted to make, if I got offered a job at Google or Twitter or one of these companies, maybe, but with children, no way. No, there's no chance. No chance.
I could do something if it was temporary, like, oh, I go work the Arizona Fall League for 2 months and did something for them. And even if it wasn't, even if it was like for minimum wage, if it was something that was fun or something that I would enjoy or put me in a place that was fun, I would consider it, but it would have to probably be a short period of time, because at some point I'd be sitting there after probably hour 1 or 2. And I'm like, what am I doing here? I could just go home and make a few videos and probably, make more than this. So at some point the proverbial clock would run out, but I could see doing something for a very short period of time. If it was something I really wanted to do, if maybe it was with some people that I wanted to work with, but those opportunities don't present themselves. I'm not out looking for those opportunities, but if something came up, and it wouldn't even have to be for money, it would be just more for an enjoyment. If it was like a certain area of the country or, something like that, or help run a card show, and spend the last couple of months helping running a card show. I think that would be fun. Something that would be good experience, but no, we could never, we'd get fired after the first hour, I'm sure. So.
Well, I hear Twitter has a few openings right now, Colin.
Yeah,
so
I'd be down. If I was a single guy, and I had better understanding of the coding, that would be a job I would love to try to get, but I can't do it. I can't live in San Francisco. I just wouldn't be able to do it.
Yeah.
Let's talk a few minutes about how you guys are perceived in the hobby. There are some people who just absolutely hate you guys. And I've heard you both describe your approach to content with this idea of playing a heel character, a heel character in wrestling, similar to that WWF bad guy. And you've never been shy about calling out scams and scandals and shadiness, but there is a line between discussing those topics and then going over the top and full on taking things to the next level like you guys like to do. When did you decide to not just kind of be bold and report on the negative aspects of the hobby or some of these things that weren't on the up and up, but go full on into that bad guy character?
I would say the turning point was the industry summit, probably in 2013, maybe. Before from 2008 to about 2012 or somewhere in that range, our website and our podcast and our content would be viewed as super positive or whatever it was. And at that time, certainly there were negative things to report on in the hobby, and certainly when something weird happened, we would report on it. But it was a different time. It was a different time in the hobby, different time in our development of developing content. But then he shows up at the industry summit and kind of, was kind of trying to stir the pot, if you will. And I think the guy, Kevin Isaacson, basically was like, get the hell out of here. And we haven't been back since. And ever since then, it was kind of like, hey, we don't need these guys. We don't need, the industry probably needs us more than we need it. And so, just ever since then, it had taken a turn a little bit. And it was a little bit of a balance those next few years where it was like, we'd still talk about like this set came out or this, this was cool. And then to like, oh, this shadiness, this redemption card or whatever it might be. And so I think it just started to pivot when, we started to get to know, I think it was also, you started to get to know the people in the hobby and you started to realize, like, I think I always had a term, like you show up at these things and nobody's got a nice watch on, nobody's got a nice pair of shoes on, nobody's driving a nice car. And I'm not trying to disrespect these guys, but it's like, how can I respect these guys if, like they're making, less than we are on some stupid website. So it's like, I think we started to just see these guys for what they were and kind of see through their BS and just started calling them out on it. It certainly has just ramped up as the years have gone on. I don't know if he has a different recollection on this or.
I think that's about right. It's kind of when we started to get to know people. But yeah, I think a good thing to point out is probably there was about 4 or 5 years where our content was very G-rated, very positive. We gave away a lot of cards. We just produced, made a lot of checklists. The podcast, I'm sure, was pretty safe.
Yeah.
It talked about very safe topics. I mean, all those things are still on the website. People could go look. And there was kind of a turning point there. I do remember one of the employees at Topps coming up to us at it was like 2012 or 2013 industry conference at the Orleans, and he's coming up to me and his hands are shaking and he's like, why don't you want to partner with us? And why don't you want to be nice to us? And I just remember looking at him and be like, I don't need anybody in this room, like looking him dead in the face. And so I think that's probably when things changed. And now, we've been making some YouTube videos for the last 9 months. It really feels like we've had to kind of tone it back. I know, Mike, you've listened to some of our podcasts that, well, you got to make sure your kids are in bed, or certainly there should be a few more, bleeps or an explicit warning on it. I feel like some of the subjects we've talked about and how we talk about people, we've actually really had to dial it back. I actually remember editing a clip for a video that I made. And I remember listening to the podcast and being like, whoa. And it was a 30-second clip, and I had to edit out 5 parts of what he said. And I can't even say them on this podcast. It was like, oh, can't say that anymore. Oh, can't say that about that person. Oh, can't suggest that. But the clip ended up being a really great clip. But there were literally 5 parts of a 30-second clip that I had to edit out that you just can't say those things anymore. So, I mean, I feel like we've had to dial it back. But part of it is we've been around so long. We've been doing this for 14 years. So anybody that's been doing content for 14 years, your tone of voice might change, your view of the hobby might change. Certainly the hobbies, changed quite a bit. So I think it is okay to, you don't have to push it as far as we have, but, I think it's okay to challenge things in the hobby. And certainly we have, a much larger audience than we do now, but this is pretty easy. This is easy for us. This is something we've been doing a long time. Again, I feel like we've had to dial it back in the last couple of years. I remember some of our 2019 podcasts, they're just, you can't play those things right now for a lot of different reasons, for language and just some of the things we said. So, but it's a lot of fun. And yeah, I think our tone changed probably, it's probably going on about 10 years ago, or probably about 8 to 10 years ago. So we've kind of played this heel character for about 8 to 10 years. It's gotten easier for us. You got to have thick skin. You've got to embrace that you're going to have half your audience potentially hating you. I think we actually lead the league now in converting haters. We've had a lot of people who've hated us maybe at the start of the year. Now all of a sudden they're like, wait a minute, I kind of like those guys. We get those comments and those messages quite a bit. So, we'll see what 2023 brings. We'll see how our tone changes. Look, full disclosure, I could see a scenario where we pivot back and now all of a sudden we're like, oh, sorry, guys, we're doing G-rated content again. I'm enjoying buying and selling cards. Let me show you that process. Maybe, whatever happens, I could see a total pivot back to the G-rated content. Maybe somebody offers us $200,000 and we make G-rated content. So, there's a lot of scenarios where, hey, our tone could boom, shift back. So for now, this is what we enjoy doing. This is what we're used to doing. There's not many people who fill that space in the hobby. So I think for now, we do enjoy that, coming out and hearing the boos a little bit. And we kind of, embrace hearing the boos. And so we don't mind that at all.
Yeah, you guys have really leaned into that role from the sports card perspective. And I think people would be a little bit surprised of how you come across differently on some of those other channels, podcast shows that you've done over the time. The power selling, Colin, you weren't anything like that, right? On that one. The same thing with some of the videos that you had done, for stock analysis. It truly is a character and a role that you guys are playing from the sports card world. Many people view you guys as 2 guys who are consistently negative and hate the hobby and only looking to tear people down. But if you listen closely, especially in some of that older content that you were referencing, you did mix in a ton of helpful educational content, right? You were sharing some great ideas on content creation, encouraging people to start their own blogs, websites, podcasts. You were telling people how to get started buying and selling, flipping on ComC and some other platforms like that. And that's honestly where I was inspired to start WaxPackHero and start the podcast, from taking some of those educational nuggets from the content, kind of filtering out some of the nonsense and pulling out some of these helpful ideas. And a lot of people miss that, right? They only hear that surface level type stuff, especially from that older content. Is being helpful actually one of the goals that you guys have in your content?
Oh, I mean, with sports card radio, probably not. I would say like at this point. In the past, yes. Now I think it's more to get a reaction, get the boos, get the cheers, get the conversation started. I think what we do a decent job at now is just put out a really quick video on a topic. As a couple of weeks ago, it was like the Kaboom stuff or the 86 Fleer stuff. It's like put out an idea, and then 4 or 5 other people, or maybe more than that, will then discuss it from their own perspective and their own angle. And I actually think that's really cool. And so I think you need both sides. If everybody was just putting out one type of content, you wouldn't get that kind of back and forth. And so I think now it's really just put the content out there that draws a reaction, draws discussion, and then watch the other channels, watch the other people discuss it. Certainly in other content, yeah. I mean, my finance channel is all about teaching people how to read financial documents, really is what it's all about. And I could certainly be attacking certain companies, certain industries, certain other content creators. I don't really go that route, only because the mission of that channel is not really to cause problems and cause conflict. I get enough of it here, so might as well focus my attention here. And so, yeah, I think in the past, yeah, we touched on all the topics, like where to buy and sell, how to start a website, how to do this, how to do that, and then kind of documented our success doing these types of things as well. And then at some point, you just kind of run out of maybe fresh perspective on that. And it's like, yeah, we could talk about Check Out My Cards a lot. We could talk about ways to build websites, build content, market yourself. But at some point you lose a little bit of passion to share those types of things. And I think right now our role is really just kind of put out something. We get fed 99.9% of this. And so that's kind of our role. Is there's a lot of people out there getting scammed or rolled, and then they come to us to get their perspective or their message out. And I think right now that's fine. And I'm sure if we're around in another 10 years, it probably will be something different, but for now, I think that's where we sit with this.
Cool. Any thoughts from you, Ryan?
Yeah, I think at this point, for me, it's not so much education. First of all, there's a lot of people who know far more about the hobby than I do and deal in much higher valued cards than I do. I mean, I'm focusing buying and selling cards that are $10 and under. I couldn't tell you what the last any release of Panini or Topps is. Like, I'm not following that. So there are people who know more about the hobby and kind of the ins and outs. Kind of like Colin said, our role is we get information, people feed us information. They know we have no filter and we're willing to kind of present any story. So, that's kind of our role, to present these stories to the hobby that maybe wouldn't get told. And I enjoy that. I actually really enjoy that. If I had to sit here and make a video and, talk about the ins and outs of a vault or an alt or how to use PWCC, I might fall asleep after, a minute and a half. But, if I get to come on camera and be like, hey, this guy took this pack that you can clearly see right there, and he took it and he went like this, and guys, so yeah, see you guys later. So, I mean, that's fun. For me, that's super fun and super easy. And it certainly, at least at this point, is drawing some attention in the hobby. And if, hey, people take that and run with it, it's fun. I mean, watching some of the stuff in the finance space and guys get called out, I mean, I feel like we need to step it up a notch. I mean, I've seen some scams happen, certainly there's these crypto scams and some of the way these guys talk about people. So certainly I think our role now is to not inform. I think we did that for many years. We put out really kind of dry content, the checklist and so on and so forth. And some of the podcasts were just strictly informative. I think now it's really kind of playing that, wrestling heel, the TMZ role, the hey, here's this story, and just let people kind of run with it. So I'm still learning about cards myself. I learn about cards from other people and other content creators, and listening to you, Mike. I listen to your podcast a lot, and because we're kind of in the same, you're buying a lot of like cheaper collections and kind of stuff like that, and that's kind of the area of cards that I like to kind of play in. So I'm learning more from other people than probably trying to educate at this point.
Let's talk a little bit about where things are at in the hobby. We've seen a tremendous run up and now a bit of a correction in cards over the last couple of years. We've seen a ton of collectors either return to the hobby or maybe start collecting for the first time. And there's been an explosion of podcasts and YouTube channels that have all started about the same time. Some are providing great info, and some who are intentionally or unintentionally sharing some pretty bad advice. And so for many years, you discussed that many of these card companies were on the brink of collapse. But how do you see the current state for card manufacturers?
The current state is probably decent when it comes to Topps. They basically got bailed out by Fanatics. They got bought for $500 million before we saw this rather large correction. Like that company, if they would have held on, that's probably worth $300 million now. So they got bailed out a little bit. Panini is either going to hang on with their licenses for the next year or 2 years, or however long they've got them. And if they want to play that route, they can. If they want to sell those licenses or sell part of their business, that opportunity may be there. From what I'm hearing, the financing is tough right now. I mean, you're not going to be able to go get a bank loan to buy a semi-profitable company. It's just always been a tough business with the manufacturers. A lot of people think they just print money. And it's like, yeah, they print money for the leagues, because for every dollar of sales, I think 20 cents goes to the league, and then another probably 20 cents goes to the players. And so for every dollar, you're only left with 60 cents. And that's before any operating costs, any product costs, cost of goods, shipping. FedEx and UPS and logistic providers, they've got to chew up 10 cents of every dollar just in the logistics of moving them. There was all these middlemen with the GTSs and the guy that runs the Target thing. It's like there were all these people in the middle. And so it sucked up a lot of the profit. Obviously, Fanatics is working to eliminate a little bit of that. But now we're running into a recession to where it's like, do people really want to pay $300 for a box of UEFA Chrome or something like that? Like it's always been this way, though. It's always been kind of big waves of, hey, cards are awesome, a bunch of new people come in, and then boom, the values just kind of crash, and then it tends to plateau kind of at the bottom for a little while, and then you have these very short peaks where interest and money and profits roll in. But boy, those profits are short-lived. And then certainly when you look at the products, most of them are rookie heavy, particularly football and probably basketball to maybe a slightly lesser degree. So if the rookie classes are garbage, or the key guy gets hurt, or whatever it might be, well, then it becomes even harder to make money. And so for me, the business from the quote manufacturer end has not changed a whole lot. Fanatics buying Topps changes that a little bit. If I were to have to put money into one of the companies, probably Topps, because they have financial backing, they have the right perspective, eliminating all the people in the middle and going direct to consumer or going direct to breaker or something like that. So for me, that hasn't changed a whole lot, but yeah, the profits. And then every year sports gets more popular, and then they renegotiate the contracts. And instead of 20 cents, now you're giving 23 cents on every dollar. And to me, it's like one of the worst businesses in the world. There's just not many people that have gotten mega rich you get mega rich by being the NFL. You don't get mega rich by like being a licensee of the NFL. That's just how I see the business.
Yeah, Panini seems to be in a world of hurt. Definitely a lot of question marks about their future. What do you think about, or how do you think about some of the niche players like Brian Gray at Leaf? They've done okay, right, with what they've got for them. You've got Parkside Cards that has some niche products. You've got Wild Card that has, some unlicensed collegiate, NIL type products. they seem to be carving out this niche in the hobby for themselves, and at least enough to be able to continue and sustain. How do you think about some of those niche companies?
Do you want to touch on Brian Gray?
It was great seeing him come on your live stream a few weeks ago. That was fantastic.
Yeah, that was pretty awesome. I mean, we certainly could sit down with him and probably do like a 2-hour special with him where we dive into every single topic over the last 10 years with him. I think with these niche card makers, I think there's probably some opportunities. They're not going to get big. It's not going to be some big, huge business, but you're right with the NIL with some of these guys. I mean, imagine if there was some Victor Wembanyama cards right now, and some people may not know who that guy is, but he's like some 7'5" guy that moves like Kevin Durant and you know, might shoot like Steph Curry a little bit. So I mean, I think that he's shaking his head. Well, yeah, we'll watch this back in a year and see what he says. But there's opportunities before these guys hit the league or before they hit the licenses, certainly with some of these other growing sports, probably, you know, soccer. There's all types of leagues with soccer that you have to get licenses with. But, you know, a smaller company could come in and create, I think it's got to be, you know, a key sport. It's either got to get pre-draft like football or pre-draft like with basketball. I mean, honestly, what would a Victor Wembanyama autograph sell for right now? I think it would be several $100s at least. I mean, he's going to be the clear #1 pick, even if he probably, you know, goes out and breaks 2 knees tomorrow. So I think there's opportunity for the smaller players. Brian Gray, he seems more like a hustler because he's buying and selling a lot of singles. You know, he's not strict. I think he likes to portray himself as this kind of manufacturer, but that guy's out there hustling. He's buying single cards. I've seen him at the National, you know, buying single cards, and whether these things end up in a repack or he's selling them on eBay or whatever he's doing kind of behind the scenes, you know, there's some more angles to his business than just making cards, kind of printing cards. You know, you don't see Topps sitting there at the National doing large cash deals for cards. So he's a little bit more of a hustler, but some of these smaller companies, you know, again, there's got to be a niche. There's got to be some interest, or it's just got to be so small. It's 2 or 3 people put together a skateboarding set or whatever it is. I think there's opportunities in music. We've talked to a few guys who've been connected with cards over there who are trying to break into the music, but there you're running into all kinds of licensing from the record company, from the guy's manager, from all these people who kind of control these artists who don't just want these cards out there. And so I think there's opportunities, but I think you run into obstacles the same way you do with these larger companies, with licensing, with players, with money, with getting these guys to, you know, pay attention to you and sign cards or whatever it is. So I think it's a challenging business. I'd rather be probably on the other end and selling all these people's cards. But, you know, somebody like Brian Gray, he's been able to make it work because I think he is a hustler. He's out there doing a lot of different things. He's, you know, spending a lot of money at the National to, again, take those cards and repackage them in some kind of way, and not the traditional way of, you know, printing cards, cutting them up, putting into packs. That's a tough business historically. And we've seen that unless you get a company like Fanatics coming in, could you imagine if Fanatics hasn't come in, what shape would Topps or Panini be in after this huge run up? You've probably had to employ a bunch of people, and then boom, you've seen the market fall out of your product. You've seen weak rookie classes in football. You've seen, you know, pretty good rookie classes in basketball, but people aren't interested in Cade Cunningham, Evan Mobley, and some of these guys who may be good players, but they just don't have the juice as somebody like Luka did, or Zion, or some of these guys we've seen in the past. Or certainly with Wembanyama, it's going to come along and, you know, really put a jolt to the basketball. He keeps shaking his head because he thinks he sucks, but I mean, this guy's unbelievable. So watch when this guy comes along. Interest in basketball cards are going to spike up around the summertime or whenever they get this guy's cards into circulation, because he could be, you know, a generational player.
You talked about being on the other side. On the selling side, we've also seen an explosion in marketplaces. And some of the new marketplaces seem to be gaining some traction. Others seem like they're already, even in the midst of this peak that we've seen, seem to be on the brink of shutting down. Do you think, from your perspective, that any of these new platforms have hit on something that will lead to long-term success as a card marketplace?
I think there's room for more than certainly before the boom. There was room for like 1 or 2 other ones. And then certainly the auction houses have kind of shifted from, their focus was more maybe towards that connoisseur type buyer. I see them starting starting to shift more to the kind of maybe the retail buyer, the average buyer of cards, to maybe a slightly above average with their price point. But I think there was room for it. Certainly a platform that's similar to Check Out My Cards, and I think Alt has done it to a certain degree, where it's kind of cross-platform to where they're still utilizing eBay. Nobody's going to be able to take away eBay only because of its reach and its ubiquity kind of in the hobby, but using it as a platform is certainly viable. And I think, the auction houses may get there as well, to where, you kind of cross parallel into those places too. The vaulting idea, certainly there was room for more vaults, I think, because, if you amass a lot of cards, you don't necessarily want them on you. And after you kind of touched a really nice card, like, I don't know, you don't really need to touch every single nice Michael Jordan card that you have. And so I think there was opportunity there, and I think it was good to see the investment. Obviously, some of them certainly just didn't have the right marketing, or maybe didn't pace their investment money very well, and they kind of ran to the end of the rope on that. But that kind of happens. But I think from a buying and selling standpoint, I would say the hobby is in a much better place than it was just 3 or 4 years ago, where you have more options. The liquidity, if you need to get out of a card, is there. You might not get the price you wanted, but there are multiple ways to sell the cards. And then certainly if you are a buyer of cards and you're trying to accumulate either a certain player or a certain type of card, the accumulation, I would say, is a little bit easier because there's more places to buy these cards. And so I think it was good. Obviously, there's going to be failure in any type of business, but that failure kind of allowed the ones that were already doing pretty decent to continue on. And so I think that's actually been there's been many positives, but that's probably been one of the larger positives to come after kind of the boom, is there are more options and more places to either sell these cards or to acquire them and buy them.
From what I'm seeing, it also seems like some of these new content creators and platforms are geared towards the newer entrants to the hobby, and while I appreciate that desire to bring eyeballs and awareness to this new segment, they also have a very different approach to the hobby as some of the more traditional or longer term collectors. At the same time, the hobby has been very historically slow to adapt, and preferences of the lifers aren't necessarily the only thing that content creators or some of these companies should be focused on. Do you have any thoughts on this balance of maybe creating a business that's focused on a customer or a viewer base, which may not ultimately be here very long term, versus getting stuck in the past by focusing on lifers who don't want anything to change at all? It seems to be kind of a fine line to walk. And I was curious if you guys had any thoughts on that.
It's really interesting because you're seeing the two almost collide. There's a whole bunch of influx of new people who came into the hobby. Now some of them are staying in. There's a whole bunch of us, like Mike here, Colin and Mike here, and us who've been around for, seemingly decades now. And I've seen some of the new companies it's hard to reach some of us older guys. And somebody like Check Out My Cards probably hasn't reached some of the new people like a Star Stock did, like an Alt is trying to do, and a PWCC I think has probably done a better job of reaching some of the new people. Some of the older people have been around and know some of their history, probably refuse to use them. So there's a very fine balance, and not to pat ourselves on the back, but we've probably at Sports Card Radio have done a little bit of a good job of reaching the new audience. Now, maybe they hate us, but, certainly I think the older and the new audience is, we're kind of tapped into both sides. And it's really interesting. And we're kind of in this middle portion here where, these people who are going to stay into the hobby, what's everybody's role going to be? All these new sites, all these new kind of websites came along, selling platforms came along. Are they all going to be around? Is there room for all of them? we're still in this kind of flux. I think 2023 is going to be a very, very interesting year where we're going to see this play out. These new people that have stuck around, these new companies, how's it all going to play out? Are they going to be able to get enough business? You know, they probably aren't going to scale up, but are they going to be able to scale up to a point where they're going to be able to sustain a business? Very, very interesting. Kudos to the content creators who kind of came along during the sports card boom and are still here and are still creating content. That's difficult to do. I'm sure they get as much criticism or more than we do a lot of times for some of their past statements or how they felt about cards, or some of their old videos are probably cringeworthy. Honestly, go listen to some of our first podcasts or some of our first appearances. They're going to be cringeworthy. We're going to have bad takes, bad advice. We clowned on Luka Doncic for how many years when his cards were way, way cheaper than they were. I mean, right when Luka Doncic came out, we were clowning on him. And then we saw his cards go tick, 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 tick up. Now they're on a downside. We're not taking any kind of victory lap there because that guy's a great player and there's, you know, market forces and kind of an oversupply that's in play there. But, you know, kudos to the people that are still around. It's going to be a very, very difficult 2023, I think, to kind of mesh the two kind of people together, the older collectors and these new people that just came around and are still kind of learning things. 2023 is going to be very difficult. You know, is everybody going to make it? Is there money enough for everybody? Are we going to still see kind of a decline in the market, decline in interest of cards? We shall see. My prediction is that we are, and 2023 is going to be a very difficult year. And the companies that are able to kind of grab as much market share as they can, get as much interest from as many people, hold the older people's interest, hold some of those newer people's interest, they're going to have success. Or some of those legacy brands, PSA, ComC, some of the older companies that have been around and withstood the kind of booms and busts, I anticipate that they'll be fine as well.
It seems that the switch to sports card radio creating YouTube content versus the audio only podcast content was something that has really led to your audience exploding in this last year. I was wondering what led to that evolution towards creating video content instead of audio only. Was it the content that you were doing in some of these other areas that kind of solidified that for you as a place to go next?
Yeah, so I think I kind of shut down the podcast. It was like, you know, March 2020. We all know what was going on then. And I was like, you know what? I want to look back on 2020 and be like, I accomplished this. Like, I don't want to look back on it negatively. And so I look back on 2020 as one of my greatest years of all time. Like, I switched to talking about finance. I think at the time I had 1,000 subscribers on a finance channel, and saw the rapid growth that you could have over there. And I remember just talking to him on the phone. I was like, dude, we got to YouTube. We got to go to YouTube. I think, I mean, like, we talked about it for months where it's like, dude, we got to get on YouTube and we got to go over there and start testing out. And I think it took us a while. Like people would criticize us and stuff in the beginning. We were trying to figure out what was going to work over there. And that's that is the challenge with YouTube, is so many people start it, but they don't take it to the finish line, because you have to, there's a balance. Like, there's content that works there that'll get you to a certain level. And then if you want to blast over that, you kind of have to constantly be kind of mixing in new things. And so, yeah, it was just seeing the explosive growth of the stock market growth, kind of parallel trading card, any asset really parallel. You could have talked about whatever, like carpets, and probably did okay. And so we just saw the growth there. I constantly told them, dude, we got to get on there. I was watching watch content and day in the life videos of that. And I was like, dude, this is sick. We got to do this. And we just kind of continued to do it and just kept testing things. And then eventually just, and also, like, to be honest with you, just getting paid. I did the podcast for freaking, I don't know, 10 years or more. And I never made any money. Like, it literally, I still pay like $150 a year to just host the freaking podcast, and I don't make any money. Like, could I get advertisers and things like that over the years? Probably. But it was like, it was just like, hey, we could put up a video and get 1,000 views and make $18. Like, to me, it was like, okay, like, that's much better cheaper than recording a podcast and making zero. And so it really kind of just like spun from that, like seeing the growth. And then we wanted just our haters to see, like we could see like who was listening to the podcast. We could see the interaction if he showed up at an event or the emails or the DMs or whatever, but no one else could see that. And we're like, dude, let's put this on YouTube. All the haters could see the views, they could see the comments, and we could just like punch them in the face twice. And so it's kind of like those two things, like all of those things combined was kind of the money and just the growth, and just this is where content constantly changes. You know, it started out as text, then it's like text and images, and then people started posting to social media sites, and now it's moving to video and streaming video. And I'm sure in 10 years it'll be something different, but you know, you constantly have to move on the internet. If you're still trying to make a forum $1 million website, it's not going to work anymore, or a blog or something like that. You constantly have to improve. And I think it was kind of all of those things combined that led us to YouTube. And I think it's been a great medium for us. And I think, look, I think if you look, I bet if other people look at their YouTube videos, whose video do they watch and then go click on? It's probably our videos a lot of the times. And it's just like Jeff, like we look at our thing and it's like, yeah, people watch Jeff Wilson and they click on our video, or they watch Mojo Autographs or Sasha T or one of these guys, and then they come click on our video. So we're out here making fun of these guys, but we actually want more people out here doing it. And that's why we get excited if we put out a topic and then 8 other videos kind of get spawned on it. That's actually a good thing, because the ecosystem kind of feeds on itself a little bit. Even though we're kind of poking and prodding people, it's really out of, you know, like keeping that ecosystem kind of moving. And so I really like YouTube in that sense, that that's unique to YouTube. Whereas you could put out a podcast and it could be amazing, but like nobody would care, no comment. There's just nothing on top of the podcast. Really. And so that's particularly unique about YouTube. You can do a video and then there's these response videos that kind of spawn from it.
When it comes to your goals for the channel, what does success look like for you?
I don't. I mean,
I'll tell you. Like for me, it's like I look at like subscribers and views as people, and so like, you know, like if like 20,000 people view a video, I look at that as like you just walked into a basketball arena and everybody was there to hear you talk. And so I like that feeling. I think the goal for me personally next year is try to get to 100,000 people subscribe to the channel. I don't think that is going to happen, but that'll be the goal. And so set this super high goal. And for me, it's like, try to get to 100,000 people subscribe to the channel next year. So for me, that's the driving force. I want 2 plaques on 2 different channels. Everything else would be secondary. That's my own personal goal with it. Whether or not we have the time and the topics and the wide enough content, like appeal of it to do that, I don't know. But that is my personal goal heading into next year with the channel. I don't know about him.
I'm surprised how many people watch. I mean, you know, 20,000 people watch a video within a few days. I mean, it's just pretty shocking. And then 500-600 comments on some of those, you know, videos, and they go half and half, you know, sometimes hating us, sometimes, you know, loving us. So, and we get, you know, lots of emails, lots of response on social media. So I mean, success is, I'm already pretty shocked at how many people have started to watch. We certainly have goals. I think we said at the beginning of the year, hey, let's get to 10,000 subscribers. I think we had around 5. And I think, I don't know, we're approaching 20,000 now. So I think, yeah, the goal is 100,000 subscribers. It's possible. I could see a very bad year for cards in 2023, where a lot of people are going out of business, lots of scams happen, lots of kind of changes happening in the market with fanatics and where you might be able to sell these things, and, you know, different breakers maybe reaching different hierarchies. So I could see a very, very productive 2023 for us, where we're talking about a lot of different things and a lot of different topics. So I think, you know, 100,000 certainly possible, and we're going to give it a shot. So, but for me, I'm stunned by how many people watch and listen already. So success for me, and the fact that some of our haters have to now see this, that to me is success. I mean, you could just name down our top 10 haters and they have to come to our channel and be like, holy crap, they've tripled their subscriber count. 10 to 20,000 people watch each one of these videos. I just can imagine some of the looks on people's faces. I'm not going to name names, but I could just imagine some of the looks on people's faces, and they just cannot believe. And I literally have saved quotes from them talking about how nobody listens to you guys, nobody listens to your podcast, nobody this person gets this many views, and I'll probably just saving those for a later time to really call them out.
It's just like an athlete, like like Kobe Bryant or Michael Jordan. You'd always hear about like they would put some stupid geek reporter who said he sucked or he was over the hill, and he would clip that out. And half the world loves this guy, and he would take the one hater that makes $20,000 writing articles, and you'd put it up on his wall. And so that's kind of what we do, is like the one hater that I think that fuels us as well. It's like the hate actually fuels us to keep going. So I think if the hate were to go away, it would derail the channel tremendously. And so we're trying to keep that level up, because that certainly is motivation.
Well, hey, I want to thank both of you for hanging out today. Like I had mentioned earlier, I owe you a debt of gratitude for the push to start the blog and to start the podcast, and for taking time to respond to some of my DMs and questions about affiliate marketing and running a website and all of those things over the years. So I really appreciate that. Before we go today, if people aren't aware of you and where to find you, let people know where they can find both of you and find the channel.
Well, we've obviously the YouTube channel. You can search just Sports Card Radio YouTube, or Sports Card Radio on YouTube. It'll pop up. Sports Card Radio on Instagram, Sports Card Radio on Twitter. He has Sports Card News on Twitter. And that is basically, and the podcast, you could search like Sports Card Radio podcast, and it probably shows up. I haven't posted to it in a little while. Again, I don't get paid to do it. So it's like I have all this other content I get paid to do. So it's hard to do something for free. I do the investor channel here on YouTube as well. And that's basically what we have going on, I think. Yeah. And people are more than welcome to leave a comment. We get so many comments. We do read as many as we can. If you can send us an email, sportscardshow@gmail.com. The DMs are open on any of the social platforms as well. I get hundreds. I don't have very many subscribers or followers on Instagram, but the people following you versus messages is a very abnormally high on there. So I'll tend to get I batch my replies. So it might be once a month, I'll just sit down and kind of go through all of them. But obviously the people that constantly email us, the squeaky wheel gets the grease sometimes. So if we don't get back to you right away, please continue to contact us. But we try to recognize the big stories or the big complaints, and we try to address those relatively quickly.
Any final thoughts from you, Ryan?
No, appreciate your podcast. I listen to it quite often, and the guests you have, and I actually learned quite a bit. We're kind of in the same space selling cheap cards, so it's actually kind of useful for me. So thanks for kind of all your work and all your podcasts that kind of you've done over the years.
Well, thanks a lot, guys.
All right, Mike. Thanks for having us.